It's been a while since my last proper case review, and it seems like ages since the last time I had the chance to look at a small form factor chassis. So when Fractal got in touch recently to say they had a new ultra compact Mini-ITX case ready to launch, I was eager to take a look. The new FRACTAL TERRA combines a tiny 10.4 litre small form factor with Scandinavian design elements and the ability to cram in high-end hardware. But can this new Mini-ITX case from FRACTAL deal with current hardware demands, and is it an improvement on what came before it? Let's find out. So the FRACTAL TERRA is a new Mini-ITX case, very compact 10.4 litre capacity. It is available to purchase now from the usual retail outlets. It's going to cost you $179.99 US in the US. The UK price I'm not 100% sure on right now, but if that is confirmed before this video goes live, you'll probably see it somewhere down here or up here. As I say, it's a very compact small form factor chassis. It measures just 343 millimeters long by 153 millimeters wide and 218 millimeters tall. As I've already said, 10.4 litre capacity. The case is made from a steel chassis, so the internal steel chassis, and then these outer panels are anodised aluminium. It's available in 3 different colours. We have this green one here that is called Jade. There's also a graphite colour which almost looks black, and then a silver version. The main feature of this FRACTAL TERRA is the central spine that can be moved or adjusted to improved space for graphics card or CPU coolers. On the front of the chassis, you'll see there's a walnut trim panel at the bottom there. On that walnut panel, there's a power button, a single Type A USB 3.0 port, and then a USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type-C port. It also comes with a PCIe Gen 4 riser cable, which you will need if you are installing a dedicated graphics card in here. You'll see later on in the build why you need that. And it also looks like it has really excellent ventilation. Both sides, the roof of the case and the floor are well ventilated. Big vents, so hopefully should have good airflow and good cooling. In terms of cooling capacity, it supports just a single 120mm fan that can be installed on the floor. Radiator installation is a bit tricky. In fact, it only supports a 120mm radiator or AIO, and you have to trade off graphics card size to be able to fit a radiator inside the case. With a 120mm radiator installed, you can only fit up to a 200mm long graphics card. CPU cooler height is a maximum of 77mm tall, so you're going to need quite a low profile CPU cooler with the FRACTAL TERRA, especially if you're not going to be using a 120mm radiator. It also features a flow-through GPU offset, so any graphics cards that may have a fan that flows through the graphics card, it has some kind of standoffs to create a bit of a gap between the graphics card and the power supply for that flow-through airflow. In terms of hardware support, motherboard support obviously is Mini-ITX in this case. Maximum GPU length is 322mm long. Maximum GPU height depends on the configuration that you have the case in. It's either 131mm or 145mm. The maximum GPU width is 72mm. And then in terms of storage, you can install up to 2.5-inch drives in here. There's no support for 3.5-inch drive bays. Power supply type is either SFX or SFXL. With the case, you get a small box of accessories that just includes a few screws, standoffs, some straps for tying cables down, and a cleaning cloth and an SSD caddy for installing SSDs on the floor. The other thing you get is a user manual, which is quite a useful and detailed user manual. It kind of walks you through the installation process because there is almost kind of one way to build the system in here, or the most efficient way to build it in there. It does walk you through that process in the user guide, so it might be worth looking at the user guide if you buy the case and start installing a system. So we'll have a quick, in fact I might refer back to this user guide when I'm just talking you through some of the features of the case. So let's have a quick look at it because it is a small case ITX, so there isn't a lot to talk about, but there are some interesting and unique features with the Terra. The first one is how you get inside it. So at the back there's like a little leather tag, and you just pull that and the top panel comes out, and as I say, this is anodized aluminium. The top, front and both sides are all anodized aluminium, and it's in this jade colour. It's got kind of like a metallic finish to it. It looks really nice, really high quality look to it. I do like the design of this with the anodized aluminium and this walnut trim panel on the front. It does look different. It's almost got a kind of 70s-ish look to it, but I do quite like it. And I like how the vents have been arranged on the side as well. They look quite subtle, but also quite sophisticated looking PC case as well. So that's how you take the top off. And then to get into the sides, they just kind of clip in place, and you can just pull them out of the latches. You can just flip them up if you want to get inside it pretty quickly, or at the back there's some little latches that hold it in place. You just push the little button back, that releases the latch, and then the side panel comes off. And as you can see, again, this is a anodized aluminium. There's no dust filtration, no sound dampening material, anything like that. Just simply aluminium panels. Again, the same with this side. Pull the latches to release them, and then slide the little clip back, and then that panel comes out just the same as the other one. So once you get inside the case, as I say, there's not a lot to talk about in terms of the features, but there are some interesting things going on. As you can see, PCIe Gen 4 riser cables in there. Power supply fits in at this side. Motherboard goes here. And then if you flip it round, you can see the other side, the other end of the PCIe 4 Gen riser. Space here for the graphics card. And then also at the front, these two straps here, that is one of the locations for installing a 2.5-inch drive. It literally just slots in there, held in place with the straps. Alternatively, if you want to install another 2.5-inch drive, that can be installed on the floor with the bracket that comes in the accessory pack. But the main feature of this case is this middle spine, which is movable. I'll show you how that works. The reason for that is it's kind of so that you can trade off space between the graphics card compartment or the CPU compartment. If you only install in a small graphics card in there that's not very thick, you can move the motherboard tray that way, and then that'll allow a bit more space for a bigger CPU cooler. To adjust this central spine to create more room for hardware, either a bigger CPU cooler or wider graphics card, the first thing you need to do is remove the 4 screws. There's 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom. You need to take these screws out so that you can remove these transport locks, what Fractal call them. Once you have the case with you, you don't need those locks, they're just there for transporting the case. So you need to remove the 2 on the top, just pop the screws back in loosely, and then that'll allow the central spine to slide either way that you need it. So you remove the 2 on the top, and then remove these 2 on the bottom. So pop both of those out on the bottom. Just discard those. And if you want to just pop the screws back in loose. And you can see on the top here, there's a gauge that goes from 1 to 7. So if you want to move it all the way for better CPU clearance, you can see move it all the way to number 1. That improves the clearance in this side of the case, so you can install a bigger CPU cooler. If you move it all the way to number 1, it creates 77mm of space at this side for the CPU cooler. If you want more GPU clearance, then you have to slide it all the way to number 7, and that creates more space for a wider graphics card. Maximum graphics card width with the central spine moved all the way to number 7 is 72mm, but if you want somewhere in between, then you probably want to put it at number 3 or number 4, and that gives you around about 60mm for CPU cooler clearance and about 50mm for graphics card clearance. So I've tested a few graphics cards in here. The one that I'll be using for the build is this Gigabyte 7900 XT gaming OC card. This is about 280mm long by about 50mm wide, and you can see that will easily fit in there, no problems at all. I'll just remove the two thumb screws from the side and I will show you the biggest graphics card that I was able to install in here that did require the motherboard tray to be moved all the way to number 7. I'll just lock it off in that number 7 position and you'll be able to see what I have managed to install in here. So this is the Aorus RTX 3080 Master, and this measures about 320mm in length and about 70mm wide, and just measure how tall it is. With the PCIe slot, it's about 135mm tall. This fits in, but you have to kind of angle it from this side and just move the little strap out of the way, and then that does fit in. You can see that does fit in there, and that is probably the biggest card that you can fit in there, or that you can fit in comfortably. Something like this RTX 4090 Aero from Gigabyte, this is way too big. So this measures about 340mm by 70mm width. In terms of the width, it'd probably fit, but it is just a bit too big in terms of the length. So something like that's not going to fit in, but 320mm cards, 70mm thick, seem to fit in comfortably. Just flip the case round so you can see the other compartment. All we have in here is the motherboard tray for Mini-ITX motherboards. The Gen 4 riser cable comes through the top and then is angled so it'll connect straight into the PCIe slot. You have the cables in here for the front I/O. You notice also that the power supply fits in this size. As I said, it supports either SFX or SFXL up to 130mm long. I'm going to be using a Seasonic Focus SGX power supply, which measures 125mm, so that should fit in there pretty easily. At the front, you've got these straps for holding the SSD in position, and like I say, alternatively you can use the 2.5-inch SSD caddy or bay, and that attaches to the floor of the case. If you want to install the AIO or 120mm radiator, that installs here in front of the power supply. Obviously that limits your graphics card length, it limits it to 200mm, so you're not going to be able to install a radiator and a really high-end powerful graphics card at the same time. Then on the floor of the case, again, not a lot except for a big vent down there. There's some feet that raise it up by approximately 20mm. That gives it some ground clearance for airflow underneath, airflow in from the bottom, in from the sides. Should be pretty good in terms of Mini-ITX for cooling. Also, if you do want to add a fan, because no fans come with it, you can add a 120mm fan to the floor at this side here, and that is the only place you can add a fan. There's no fans on the sides or the top or anything like that. It's just a single 120mm fan there. Obviously your graphics card at this side, close up to the side panel, that's going to act as an intake, at least for your graphics card. Air cooler at this side on the CPU. It's going to be right next to a really heavily vented side panel, so that is also going to act as an intake. And same, I guess, for the power supply as well. That'll be installed with the fan pointing outwards right up against the vented side panel, so that'll give you some good intake and airflow to the power supply. If you've seen any of my previous case reviews, you'll know at this point I usually like to do a build inside the case and give you a time lapse to watch. That's no different with Mini-ITX, that's what I'm going to do now. As I've already mentioned, the graphics card for the build is this Gigabyte Radeon RX 7900 XT Gaming OC card. For the motherboard and CPU, I've had to step back a generation because it's been quite difficult getting hold of samples of current generation Mini-ITX motherboard. So the motherboard is this Aorus B550 Pro AX, B550i, or as Pro AX I should say. CPU is an AMD Ryzen 9 5900X. As I said, it's stepping back a generation, but it still is a powerful CPU, and it should be a good thermal test for the FRACTAL TERRA. In terms of memory, it's a Corsair Vengeance RGB Pro kit. It's a 32GB kit, DDR4 3600. These are two 16GB DIMMs. For storage, I'm just going to be using a single WD Black SN850 2TB PCIe Gen 4 M.2 NVMe drive. And then for the CPU cooler, I've chosen a really low profile Noctua NH-L9A. This is the AM4 version. This, like I say, really low profile, 37mm. So that will give me plenty of space for graphics card, even though I don't really need it with that graphics card. But as you've seen earlier, the RTX 3080 Aorus Master fitted in there perfectly. Something like this will be a good CPU cooler to use if using a thick graphics card like that. And as I said, the power supply is the Seasonic Focus SGX 650. That should be enough to power this system. So let's get on with the build. You can sit back and watch the time lapse while I put this system together. So as you can see, the build's complete, the system's all up and running. Just before I go any further, I just want to correct a mistake that I made earlier. I said the graphics card I was using inside the system was a 7900 XT. It's obviously not. Don't know why I said that. It's actually a 6700 XT gaming OC from Gigabyte. The build went pretty well. I was surprised actually. Sometimes with Mini-ITX cases you come across some problems and you can't fit hardware in or something like that, but I didn't have any major issues with the build using the FRACTAL TERRA. The only minor problem I had was fitting one of these Noctua fans at the bottom of the case, but with the Seasonic power supply that measures 125mm, there wasn't enough space to fit the fan at the bottom of the case, so I ended up just leaving the fan out and running it without it. The only other minor thing I came across was connecting up the power cable to the power supply. It was a bit awkward. I can show you why. If I just open up this side panel and actually take the side panel off and the top. So with this Seasonic power supply, the connection is at this side right up to the front of the case, which I probably assume is similar with most power supplies. It makes it a little bit awkward connecting up the cable here. There's not much space between the connection and the front of the case, so you have to bend the cable quite severely, and it is pressed up against the front panel of the case. You have to actually drop the power supply down, connect it up first, then put it into position. If that was the opposite angle and faced this way, it'd be a lot easier to connect. It's not a big deal at all. Once the power supply is in and connected up, it's fine. It doesn't seem to cause any adverse effect on the system or how it runs or anything like that. And as you can see, it's quite neat when you've got the system installed. Cable management is quite simple. I actually looped the graphics card power cables underneath the power supply and then round the front and into the graphics card, so there's no issue with them possibly getting in the way of the fans or anything like that. And the rest of the cables run along the bottom and then just up the center of the system here. So it's quite an easy case to build with. As I say, with Mini-ITX, you sometimes come across issues that you don't expect. Didn't have that problem with the FRACTAL TERRA. It actually was a very simple and straightforward build, but you're not putting a lot of components into the system, so it is going to be quite a straightforward build, but it was very easy. Just going through the steps on the user guide is quite useful. It ensures that you install everything in the correct order and nothing to complain about. I have been running some thermal tests using the 3D Mark Time Spy stress test combined with the Cinebench R23 stress test. Both the CPU and GPU temperature were within the expected range. The CPU temperature might have been slightly on the high side at around 85 degrees average, but I have used a very small low profile CPU cooler. GPU temperature was excellent at 61 degrees. The vented side panels do a really good job of allowing plenty of airflow into the system and allowing the warm air to exhaust out. It's a very similar story with noise levels. Because component temperature didn't increase or decrease by removing side panels, noise levels remain consistent with either the case in its default configuration or with side panels removed. So the FRACTAL TERRA is a very compact Mini-ITX case, and you do have to remember that when you are planning a system build. You have to watch out for the GPU thickness, the CPU cooler height. I use the Noctua NH-L9A, which is an extremely low 37mm profile CPU cooler. You could potentially fit in a Noctua NH-L9A by 65, which is a bit thicker than this one, or you can also fit in the LxWxH, but that might compromise the thickness of the GPU you can use. I don't expect this to be used as a case for your main gaming system, so it gets away with the fact that it probably doesn't support the most huge RTX 4090 and other latest graphics cards due to the thickness and the size. I expect this more to be used as something like a media PC sat under your TV in a cabinet or a TV unit, something like that. And in that respect, I think it'll work really well. So overall, the FRACTAL TERRA is a good Mini-ITX case. I actually have plans for this one to use it somewhere myself. It might be priced slightly on the high side at $174.99. Bearing in mind it doesn't come with anything like a power supply or a CPU cooler or any fans or anything. It is just the bare case, but it is a really good looking case. Its hardware support is good for its size, and airflow and cooling seems to be spot on. So thanks for watching this review of of the FRACTAL TERRA. If you have any questions about the case, drop me a line in the comment section. If you've enjoyed watching the video, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button if you've not already done so. And if you enjoy what we do here at Kit Guru and want to help support us, you can always head over to the store and pick up some merch, or you could even subscribe to our Patreon. And as always, if you want to catch up on all the in-depth technical reviews, head over to our website.